The emergency alarm screamed through the Galactic Council chambers on Station Nexus Prime, and every being present knew that sound meant death was coming for someone, somewhere in the Galaxy Council leader. Thais pressed her scaled hand against the communication panel, and the massive holographic display flickered to life, showing a transmission from the Outer Rim territories where few civilized species dared to venture. The image was shaky and filled with static, but the voice that came through was clear enough to understand, even though it trembled with fear and desperation. Ambassador Velith of the Vellani people appeared on screen, and his pale blue skin was even paler than usual, while his large, dark eyes darted around as explosions could. "Be heard in the background! Honored council members, we beg for your immediate assistance," Velith said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "The Korath Empire has arrived at our homeworld with a massive fleet, and they demand our complete surrender within 2 planetary rotations." This leaned forward in her chair, while the other council members began murmuring among themselves in their various languages, creating a buzz of worried conversation throughout the chamber. "What are their demands, Ambassador?" Thais asked. Though she already suspected the answer would be terrible, Velith swallowed hard before responding. "They want our entire population relocated to labor camps on their mining worlds, and they claim our planet contains rare minerals essential for their war machine expansion." The transmission flickered again, and another explosion could be heard much closer this time, making Velith flinch and look over his shoulder before turning back to the camera. "We have no military to speak of," he continued, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Our people have lived in peace for over 3,000 years, and our technology focuses on agriculture and medicine, not warfare." Councillor Zephys from the Alterian Republic stood up, and his crystalline form caught the light as he spoke. "How many ships do the Korath have in your system?" "Our orbital sensors detected 3 Dreadnought-class vessels, along with approximately 40 cruisers and over 200 fighter craft," Velith replied, and the fear in his voice grew stronger. "They have already destroyed our orbital platforms and our small civilian fleet." The council chamber fell silent as the members realized the magnitude of the threat facing the peaceful Vellani. People Councillor Hexan from the Rigelian Confederacy tapped his console and brought up tactical data about Korath military capabilities, which displayed on secondary screens around the chamber. "The Korath 7th Fleet," Hexan said grimly. "We have intelligence reports about this particular formation, and they have conquered 12 worlds in the past 2 years without suffering significant losses." Thais felt her heart sink as she reviewed the data, because she knew the combined military forces of the Council were already stretched thin across multiple conflicts, and none of their member species possessed the firepower needed to challenge a full Korath battle fleet. "What about the Mandorian Defense Force?" suggested Councillor Yith, whose insectoid features clicked nervously. "They have the largest fleet among our members." Councillor Vrex shook his massive head, and his fur rippled with agitation. "The Mandorians are engaged in the Sector 7 rebellion and cannot spare even a single squadron without risking total defeat there. The hegemony could provide support ships," offered another member, but this knew that even their most advanced vessels would be outgunned by Korath dreadnoughts. The transmission from Velith crackled with interference, and when the image cleared again, the ambassador looked even more desperate than before. "Honored Council, we have perhaps 18 hours before they begin orbital bombardment," he said, and tears were visible in his large eyes. "If no help comes, our entire civilization will be extinct by tomorrow." Thais looked around the chamber at the various alien faces, all showing different expressions of helplessness and frustration, because everyone knew the terrible truth that they lacked the military strength to save the Vellani people. "There must be something we can do," Councillor Yeath insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "We cannot simply abandon an entire species to extinction." "What about mercenary forces?" suggested Hexan, though he sounded doubtful. "There are independent military contractors who might be willing to engage the Korath for sufficient payment." Vrex pulled up mercenary databases on his console and shook his head after reviewing the available forces. "None of the registered contractors have enough ships to challenge a Korath battle fleet, and most would refuse the contract anyway." The council members continued debating options while the transmission from Velith remained open, and everyone could hear the distant sounds of Korath atmospheric fighters beginning strafing runs against Volani cities. This felt desperate as she realized they were failing in their most basic duty to protect peaceful member species from aggressive neighbors, when suddenly she remembered something that made her pause. "What about the newest council members?" she said slowly, as an idea began forming in her mind. "The humans from the planet they call Earth." Several council members looked confused because humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 6 months earlier, and most beings knew very little about them beyond basic diplomatic protocols, the Deathworlders. Councillor Zephys said, with obvious distaste, "I hardly think a single species from some barbaric planet could help when our combined fleets cannot." Thais accessed the human file from the Council database and began reading the planetary classification report which had been filed by the initial contact team. "Their homeworld has been classified as a Class 12 death world," she read aloud. "Extreme weather patterns, frequent natural disasters, hostile wildlife, and environmental toxins that would kill most known species within hours. How does that help us against the Korath?" Hexen asked with frustration, clear in his voice. Thais continued reading, and her expression changed as she discovered more details about human military capabilities. According to this report, humans have been engaged in continuous warfare for their entire recorded history and have developed military technologies specifically designed for survival in hostile environments. Even if they have some military capability, Vrex argued, surely one species cannot stand against the Korath Empire, which has conquered dozens of worlds. The transmission from Velith suddenly showed explosions much closer to his location, and the ambassador had to steady himself against his desk as the building shook. "Please," he said, and his voice was breaking with desperation. "We have tried everything, and there is nowhere else to turn, and if someone does not help us soon, there will be nothing left of our people except empty cities." Thais made a decision that would change the course of galactic history, though she had no way of knowing it at the time. "Open a priority channel to Earth," she ordered her communications officer. "Route it directly to their military command structure." "Are you certain about this, Council Leader?" Zephys asked, and his crystalline form seemed to dim with concern. "Involving Deathworlders in galactic conflicts could set a dangerous precedent. The Volani people face extinction," This replied firmly. "If we do nothing, they will all be dead within hours, and I would rather take risks than live with that failure." The communications officer worked quickly to establish contact with Earth, and within minutes a new transmission appeared on the main display showing a human male in military uniform aboard what appeared to be a warship. Captain Minho Kim of the UES Retribution looked directly at the council members, and his calm expression showed no emotion as he listened to Thais explain the situation facing the Volani people. "We understand the tactical situation," Captain Kim said after reviewing the data about Korath fleet strength. "We will respond immediately." "Captain," Thais said hesitantly, "you should know that our combined forces cannot match Korath military power, and they have never lost a major fleet engagement." Minho Kim smiled slightly, and there was something in that expression that made every council member feel suddenly uneasy, though they could not explain why. "Council Leader," he said calmly, "you called us because your people cannot handle this situation, and we appreciate your honesty about that limitation." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence, as everyone realized they had just asked Deathworlders to do what the entire galactic community could not accomplish. Ambassador Velith looked confused but hopeful as he heard about the humans agreeing to help. Though he had never heard of Earth or its people before this moment, "Will they really come?" he asked, and his voice carried a mixture of desperate hope and disbelief. This looked at the now empty display where Captain Kim had been and felt something she had never experienced before when dealing with military matters. She felt hope. Admiral J-Ho Lee stood in the command center of Terra Station and watched the tactical display showing the location of Valen Prime, while his staff worked frantically to prepare for what most galactic observers would consider a suicide mission. The UES Retribution was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, but it was still just one vessel against an entire Korath battle fleet that had never been defeated in open combat. Sir, the Council transmission included complete intelligence files on Korath military capabilities, reported Intelligence Officer Kyung Park as she transferred data to the main display. 3 Dreadnought-class ships, each measuring 2 kilometers in length, with heavy plasma cannons and energy shields. Admiral Lee studied the enemy ship specifications, while his tactical mind automatically began calculating engagement scenarios and possible weaknesses in Korath battle doctrine. "What about their escort vessels?" he asked, as he zoomed in on the fleet composition. "Data: 42 cruiser-class ships with medium plasma weapons and over 200 fighter craft." Kyung continued. "Total enemy personnel estimated at approximately 50,000 combat troops." Communications Officer Sunho Kwan looked up from his console with concern written across his face. "Admiral, with respect, the odds against us are nearly 50 to 1, and we have no backup available." Admiral Lee turned to face his staff, and his expression remained calm despite the overwhelming numbers they faced, because he had learned long ago that panic was more dangerous than any enemy weapon. "The Galactic Council called us because their combined fleets cannot handle this situation," he said quietly. "They need someone who understands warfare in a way that peaceful species cannot comprehend." He activated the shipwide communication system, and his voice carried to every deck of the Retribution, where crew members were already preparing for combat operations. "All hands, this is Admiral Lee," he began. "We have received a distress call from the Villani people whose homeworld is under attack by Korath forces, and we are the only ship available to respond." The crew continued their preparations without pause because they had trained for exactly this type of mission, where human military capabilities would be tested against alien opponents. "The enemy has superior numbers and firepower," Admiral Lee continued, "but they have never faced opponents from a death world where survival required learning to fight against impossible odds." In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Sora Choi was already pushing the fusion reactors beyond standard operating parameters, while her team worked to optimize power distribution for combat. "Operations, I want everything we have available for weapons and shields," she told her subordinates as she monitored reactor temperature readings. "The Korath use energy weapons, so our defensive systems will be working overtime." Engineering Specialist Hanayu looked nervous as she watched the reactor output climb toward redline levels. "Chief Engineer, these power levels are beyond recommended safety margins." Sora smiled grimly as she made final adjustments to the power coupling systems. "Hana, the safety margins were designed for normal operations against known threats, and the Korath definitely do not qualify as normal." In the weapons section, Master Gunner Do-Yun Song supervised the loading of specialized ammunition that had been developed, specifically for fighting heavily armored opponents. "Load armor-piercing rounds in all kinetic cannons," he ordered, while reviewing targeting data for Korath vessels. "These aliens have never faced depleted uranium slugs, fired at relativistic velocities, weapons." Technician Isul Nam secured the ammunition loading mechanisms and checked the targeting computers one final time before combat operations began. "Sir, the kinetic accelerators are charged and ready," she reported. "Penetration calculations show our rounds should breach Korath armor at optimal range." Do-Yun nodded approvingly, because he had spent years perfecting human weapons technology that could defeat any armor system currently known to galactic civilization in the medical bay doctor. Narration prepared for casualties by stocking emergency medical supplies and combat stimulants that would enhance human performance during battle. "Prepare 15 doses of combat enhancement drugs," she instructed medical technician Jinwoo. "Oh, if this engagement goes badly, we may need every advantage available." Jinwoo carefully measured the stimulant doses that would increase human reaction time and pain tolerance without causing permanent damage to the recipients. "Doctor, these drug combinations would be lethal to most alien species," he observed while sealing the injection devices. Nari checked her medical readings one more time before responding. "Jinwoo, we evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day, and our physiology can handle stress levels that would destroy other species." On the bridge, Captain Minho Kim reviewed intelligence reports about Korath battle tactics, while his senior officers prepared their individual departments for combat operations. Their standard doctrine involves overwhelming firepower concentrated against single targets, reported Tactical Officer Yunbi Park. They prefer to destroy enemy ships quickly rather than engage in prolonged battles. Navigator Wu Jin Han plotted the fastest hyperspace route to Valen Prime, while accounting for gravitational interference from the system's binary star configuration. "Sir, we can reach the target system in approximately 6 hours," he announced, "but we will arrive within sensor range of the entire Korath fleet." Captain Kim studied the tactical situation one more time before making his final decision about how to approach the engagement zone. "We go in fast and loud," he decided. "If we try to be sneaky, they will detect us anyway, and we lose." The advantage of choosing our engagement parameters. Dr. Hyun Lim finished reviewing Korath physiological data and joined the bridge crew to brief them on enemy capabilities and potential weaknesses. "Korath soldiers are larger and stronger than humans," he explained while displaying anatomical charts. "But their homeworld has lower gravity and they have never developed the reflexes needed for high-stress combat." "What about their pain tolerance?" asked Yunbi as she considered how human weapons might affect alien opponents. "Their nervous system is actually more sensitive than ours," Hyun replied. "They evolved as apex predators on a world with limited threats, so they never needed to develop human-level damage resistance communications." Officer Jihyo Kim monitored galactic news feeds and intercepted Korath military transmissions to gather real-time intelligence about enemy movements. "The Korath are broadcasting propaganda about their inevitable victory," she reported. "They seem confident that no force in the galaxy can challenge their fleet." Captain Kim smiled slightly as he heard that information because Korath overconfidence might provide tactical opportunities during the coming engagement. "They have never fought Deathworlders before," he said quietly. "Their experience is limited to conquering peaceful species that surrender after token resistance." The Retribution entered hyperspace and began its journey toward Velen Prime, while every crew member made final preparations for a battle that would test human military capabilities against a superior alien force. In his private quarters, Admiral Lee reviewed historical records of human military conflicts and reminded himself that his species had survived and thrived. Despite facing impossible odds countless times throughout their violent history, Earth had taught humanity that survival required courage, tactical thinking, and the willingness to accept casualties in pursuit of victory against stronger opponents. The Korath Empire had conquered dozens of worlds through superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they had never encountered opponents who understood that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose. Admiral Lee knew that the coming battle would either establish humanity as a significant military power in galactic affairs or result in the destruction of their most advanced warship along with its entire crew. Either way, the galaxy would learn something important about Deathworlders and their approach to warfare when peaceful solutions were no longer possible. As the Retribution traveled through hyperspace toward its destination, every human aboard understood that they were about to make history in the most violent way imaginable. The Korath had never lost a fleet engagement, and the Vellani had never been saved from extinction, but today, both of those facts were about to change forever. The UES Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velen system and immediately began passive sensor sweeps to assess the tactical situation without alerting the Korath fleet to their presence. Captain Minho Kim studied the sensor readings on his command display and saw exactly what the intelligence reports had described, but seeing it in person made the odds seem even more overwhelming. 3 massive Korath dreadnoughts hung in orbit around Velen Prime like hungry predators. While their escort vessels maintained patrol formations that covered every possible approach to the planet, sensor analysis confirms enemy fleet composition, reported Tactical Officer Yunbi Park. 3 dreadnoughts, 41 cruisers, and approximately 230 fighter craft. Navigator Wu Jin Han plotted potential attack vectors while avoiding detection by Korath long-range sensors that were scanning the system perimeter for incoming threats, sir. "The enemy has established sensor pickets at all hyperspace entry points," he announced. "They will detect us as soon as we move closer to the planet." Captain Kim nodded because he had expected the Korath to maintain proper defensive positions since They were experienced military professionals despite their overconfidence. On the planet's surface below, the Korath fleet was conducting systematic bombardment of Vallani cities, while their ground forces secured mining facilities that contained the rare minerals they wanted. Intelligence Officer Kyung Park monitored enemy communications and translated their tactical discussions, which revealed important information about Korath command structure. The fleet commander is Admiral Kethvar aboard the Dreadnought Crusher, she reported. He seems confident that no galactic force can challenge his battle group. Communications Officer Ji-Yo Kim intercepted desperate transmissions from Vallani civilians who were hiding in underground shelters, while Korath fighters strafed their cities. The Vallani are reporting massive casualties, she said quietly. Their government estimates they have less than 12 hours before complete societal collapse. Captain Kim made his decision with the calm precision that had made him one of humanity's most effective military commanders. "All stop," he ordered. "We hold position here until the Korath detect us, and then we see how they react to unexpected opposition." The Retribution powered down all non-essential systems and drifted silently through space while its crew prepared for combat against overwhelming odds. Admiral Kethvar was reviewing bombardment schedules aboard his flagship when Sensor Officer Grex announced the detection of an unknown vessel at the system perimeter, size and configuration unknown. Grex reported, "The ship appears to be of alien design, not matching any known galactic military vessels." Admiral Kethvar studied the sensor data with mild curiosity because few species possess the courage to challenge Korath military operations. Probably some foolish council patrol ship, he decided. Send the cruiser Ravager to destroy it and return to bombardment duties. Captain Zek of the Ravager received his orders with the casual confidence that came from years of easy victories against inferior opponents. The Korath cruiser was 400 meters long, with heavy plasma cannons and energy shields that could withstand most known weapon systems. Approach the alien vessel and demand their immediate withdrawal. Admiral Kethvar instructed. If they refuse to comply, destroy them quickly. Captain Zek acknowledged the orders and directed his ship toward the unknown contact while his crew prepared weapons. For what they expected to be a brief engagement, aboard the Retribution Captain Kim watched the approaching Korath cruiser on his tactical display while his crew made final combat preparations. Single cruiser inbound, reported Yunbi. They are maintaining standard approach vectors and do not appear to consider us a serious threat. Chief Engineer Sora Choi pushed the reactor output to maximum levels while her team rerouted power to weapons and defensive systems, reactors at 110%. She announced, "We have full power available for combat operations. Master Gunner Do-Yun Song locked targeting solutions on the approaching Korath vessel while his weapons crews loaded armor-piercing ammunition, kinetic cannons charged and ready." He reported, target acquisition confirmed. The Korath cruiser Ravager approached within weapons range, and Captain Zek opened communications using standard galactic diplomatic protocols. Unknown vessel, you are interfering with legitimate Korath. Military operations. He broadcast, withdraw immediately or face destruction. Captain Kim activated his communication system and responded in perfect Korath language, which surprised the enemy commander who had not expected aliens to understand. Their speech, Korath vessel. "This is Captain Minho Kim of the UES Retribution," he said calmly. "We are here to assist the Vallani people, and we suggest you withdraw from this system." Captain Zek laughed at what he considered an absurd threat from a single alien ship facing the might of the Korath Empire. "You face the 7th Fleet of the glorious Korath military," he replied. "Surrender now and we may permit your crew to survive as prisoners." "Counteroffer," Captain Kim said with a slight smile. "Surrender your entire fleet, and we may permit you to survive what comes next." The communication channel went silent as Captain Zek processed what he had just heard and realized that these aliens were either insane or possessed capabilities he did not understand. "Destroy them." He ordered his weapons crews, who immediately began firing plasma cannons at the human vessel. The first Korath plasma bolts struck the Retribution's shields and dissipated harmlessly, while Captain Kim calmly observed enemy weapons' effectiveness. Their plasma technology is approximately 20% less efficient than our defensive systems, reported Yunbi as she analyzed the enemy weapons' performance. Return fire. Captain Kim ordered. Show them what Deathworlder weapons can accomplish. Do-Hyun Song fired the kinetic accelerator cannons, and depleted uranium slugs streaked across space at significant fractions of light speed. The hypervelocity projectiles struck the Korath cruiser's shields, which collapsed. Instantly under the incredible kinetic energy transfer, 3 more rounds penetrated the ship's armor plating and tore through internal compartments while venting atmosphere and crew members into space. Captain Jek watched in horror as his ship's hull was breached in multiple locations by weapons that seemed to ignore his defensive systems. "Damage report," he shouted while alarms screamed throughout his vessel. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. His engineer reported, "We have lost main power, and the reactor is operating at 30% efficiency." The Retribution continued its attack with precision fire that targeted critical systems rather than attempting to destroy the cruiser outright, disable their weapons and engines. Captain Kim instructed, "We want prisoners who can explain human capabilities to their admiral." More kinetic rounds struck the Korath vessel and destroyed its primary weapons, while secondary explosions crippled the propulsion system. Within 10 minutes, the cruiser Ravager was drifting helplessly in space, with its crew frantically trying to repair critical damage. Admiral Kethvar received damage reports from Captain Jek and could not believe that a single alien vessel had crippled one of his cruisers. "How many ships are attacking you?" he demanded over the communication channel. "Only one, sir," Captain Jek replied weakly. "But their weapons penetrate our shields and armor like they do not exist." Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical display showing his damaged cruiser and the apparently undamaged alien vessel that had accomplished this feat. For the first time in his military career, he felt something he had never experienced before when facing enemy opposition. He felt uncertainty about the outcome of a battle, and that sensation made him angry because Korath commanders were supposed to be superior to all other species. "All ships converge on the alien vessel," he ordered. "I want that ship destroyed and its crew taken for interrogation." The massive Korath fleet began moving toward the lone human ship, while Admiral Kethvar prepared to demonstrate why his empire had never lost a major fleet engagement. Captain Kim watched the approaching enemy formation and activated the ship-wide communication system to address his crew. "All hands prepare for full combat operations," he announced. "The Korath want to show us their numerical superiority, and we are going to teach them why numbers mean nothing to Deathworlders." The crew of the Retribution completed their final preparations, while the most powerful alien fleet in this sector of the galaxy approached their position with overwhelming force. What happened next would become legend throughout galactic civilization, and establish humanity as the most feared military power in known space. Admiral Kethvar deployed his entire fleet in a massive encirclement formation designed to trap the human vessel and destroy it with concentrated firepower from multiple directions. The 3 Korath dreadnoughts positioned themselves at equal distances around the Retribution, while their escort cruisers filled the gaps and fighter squadrons swarmed through the spaces between larger ships. "Complete tactical superiority achieved," reported Tactical Officer Grex aboard the flagship Crusher. "The alien vessel cannot escape and faces overwhelming firepower." Admiral Kethvar studied the formation on his tactical display and felt satisfied that he was about to demonstrate Korath military supremacy to whatever species had dared challenge his authority. "All ships prepare for coordinated bombardment," he ordered. "When I give the signal, every weapon fires simultaneously, and we reduce that vessel to debris." The Korath fleet moved into final attack positions with the precision of a military force that had conquered dozens of worlds through superior tactics and overwhelming force aboard the Retribution. Captain Minho Kim observed the enemy formation while his crew prepared for the most challenging battle any human vessel had ever faced. "Enemy fleet deployment complete," reported Tactical Officer Yunbi Park. "We are surrounded by 3 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, and over 200 fighter craft." Navigator Wu Jin Han calculated escape vectors and found that every possible route was blocked by enemy ships positioned to intercept any attempt to flee the engagement zone. "Sir, we have no clear withdrawal options," he announced. "The Korath have effectively trapped us in their formation." Captain Kim smiled slightly because the enemy had made exactly the tactical error he had hoped they would make by assuming that humans would try to escape. From superior numbers. Perfect, he said calmly. They have concentrated their entire fleet in close formation, which means they cannot use their long-range weapons without hitting their own ships. Chief Engineer Sora Choi pushed the fusion reactors beyond all safety limits while her team prepared for emergency power distribution that would allow sustained high-intensity combat reactors at 120%. She reported, "We have maximum power available, but we can only maintain these levels for approximately 15 minutes. Master Gunner Do-hyun Song coordinated targeting solutions for multiple enemy vessels while his weapons crews prepared for rapid-fire engagement against overwhelming numbers. All kinetic cannons charged and loaded with armor-piercing rounds," he announced. "We have sufficient ammunition for sustained combat operations." Dr. Narration distributed combat enhancement drugs to key crew members who would need improved reflexes and pain tolerance during the coming battle. Enhanced reaction stimulants administered. She reported, "All personnel are operating at peak combat efficiency." Communications Officer Ji-Yo Kim established recording links to transmit the battle to galactic networks so that other species could witness what happened when Deathworlders faced impossible odds. "Recording systems active," she announced. "Whatever happens here will be seen throughout the galaxy." Admiral Kethvar gave the order that he expected would end the engagement within minutes and establish his reputation as the commander who destroyed the first Deathworlder vessel. "All ships open fire," he commanded. "Destroy the alien vessel completely." Hundreds of plasma cannons fired simultaneously, and the space around the Retribution filled with deadly energy that would have vaporized any normal galactic warship. The human vessel disappeared within a sphere of plasma fire that continued for several seconds as every Korath weapon discharged its full power. "Target destroyed," reported Grex as the weapon's fire ceased, and the tactical display showed empty space where the alien ship had been. Admiral Kethvar felt satisfied that he had demonstrated proper Korath military efficiency by eliminating a threat with overwhelming force. Then the plasma dissipated, and the human ship emerged completely undamaged while its shields glowed with absorbed energy that was being redirected to internal systems. "Impossible," Admiral Kethvar whispered as he stared at tactical readings that showed the alien vessel not only surviving, but apparently strengthened by the attack. Captain Kim activated his communication system and broadcast to the entire Korath fleet using their own language with perfect pronunciation. "Your weapons are impressive," he said calmly. "But Deathworlders learned to survive worse than that before we left our homeworld." The Retribution suddenly accelerated directly toward the center of the Korath formation, while its crew executed a battle plan that existed only in human military doctrine, Pattern Delta Combat Formation, Captain Kim ordered, and every department began implementing tactics developed for fighting superior numbers in confined spaces. Woo Jin Han piloted the ship through the enemy formation with maneuvers that seemed impossible for a vessel of the Retribution's size. As it dodged between larger ships, Yunbi Park coordinated defensive systems to absorb enemy fire while redirecting energy to weapons and shields in a continuous cycle that maximized combat effectiveness. Do-hyun Song fired kinetic cannons in carefully calculated patterns that used destroyed enemy ships as cover while targeting critical systems on multiple vessels. The first Korath cruiser exploded when hypervelocity rounds penetrated its reactor core, and the expanding debris cloud provided concealment for the human ship's next attack. Admiral Kethvar watched in disbelief as his carefully planned formation turned into chaos, while the single alien vessel carved through his fleet like a predator hunting prey. "How are they moving like that?" he demanded, as the human ship performed evasive maneuvers that defied everything he knew about space combat tactics. "Sir, their ship appears to be using gravitational manipulation combined with conventional propulsion," his science officer reported. "The technology is beyond our current understanding." Another Korath cruiser died as kinetic rounds tore through its hull and secondary. Explosions destroyed two nearby fighter squadrons that had been providing escort. The human ship continued its attack pattern while staying within the Korath formation, where the larger vessels could not use their most powerful weapons without hitting their own forces. "All ships converge on the alien vessel. Admiral Kethvar ordered desperately, ramming speed if necessary. The Korath fleet tried to coordinate their response, but the human ship moved too quickly and unpredictably for their targeting systems to maintain weapon locks communications. Officer Ji-hyo Kim broadcast the battle across galactic networks while providing running commentary that described human tactics to astounded observers. The Deathworlder vessel is using the enemy fleet's own size against them, she explained. Their formation becomes a liability when facing opponents who understand close-quarters combat. Chief Engineer Sora Choi initiated an emergency reactor overload that would provide massive power. For a limited time while accepting the risk of catastrophic system failure, emergency power surge initiated. She announced, "We have 3 minutes of unlimited energy before reactor containment becomes critical." The Retribution's weapons fired continuously. During the power surge and depleted uranium rounds streaked through space in devastating volleys that destroyed everything they hit. 6 more Korath cruisers exploded in rapid succession while fighter squadrons were swept away by point defense, systems that fired faster than alien reflexes could track. Admiral Kethvar realized that his fleet was being systematically destroyed by a single enemy vessel using tactics he could not counter or even understand. "Retreat," he ordered in desperation. "All ships withdraw to maximum range," but the human ship had positioned itself perfectly to intercept any escape attempts and continued its relentless attack while using debris from destroyed vessels as mobile cover. The Dreadnought Devastator suffered critical damage when kinetic rounds breached its armor and destroyed primary systems while its crew frantically tried to restore power. Captain Kim observed the tactical situation and realized that the Korath fleet was breaking apart under pressure from opponents they could not effectively engage. "Signal the enemy flagship," he ordered. "Offer them one final chance to surrender before we finish this engagement." The communication channel opened, and Admiral Kethvar found himself speaking to the human commander who had destroyed most of his fleet in less than 20 minutes. "You cannot defeat the entire Korath Empire," he said desperately. "We have hundreds of fleets throughout the galaxy." Captain Kim smiled coldly as he replied, "Admiral, we are not trying to defeat your empire today, but if you continue threatening peaceful species, we will show you what Deathworlders can accomplish when we really try." The battle continued with mathematical precision as human weapons destroyed the remaining Korath vessels while their crews learned why challenging Deathworlders was a fatal mistake. The space around Valen Prime had become a graveyard of twisted metal and floating debris where the mighty Korath 7th Fleet had once maintained perfect formation. Captain Minho Kim surveyed the aftermath of the battle from his command chair while damage control teams worked to repair minor systems that had been stressed during the intense combat. Only Admiral Kethvar's flagship remained intact among the Korath vessels, and even that massive dreadnought was drifting helplessly with its weapons destroyed and engines offline. Casualty report. Captain Kim requested as his crew began the transition from combat operations to rescue and recovery duties. Medical Officer Nari Yoon reviewed her department's status and reported the remarkably low human losses considering the scale of the engagement. They had just survived 7 crew members injured. "None seriously," she announced. "Combat enhancement drugs performed better than expected and we had no fatalities." Chief Engineer Sora Choi shut down the emergency reactor overload and began restoring normal power distribution while her teams assessed potential damage from extended high-energy operations. "Reactors returning to standard operating parameters," she reported. "No permanent damage detected despite exceeding safety limits for extended periods." Communications Officer Ji-hyo Kim monitored transmissions from the planet's surface, where Vallani civilians were emerging from their underground shelters to witness the impossible sight above their world. "The Vallani are reporting that Korath ground forces have surrendered," she announced. "They apparently received orders from their fleet commander to cease all operations." The planetary surface showed the results of Korath occupation, with damaged cities and mining installations, but the civilian population had survived the ordeal. Captain Kim opened a communication channel to the crippled Korath flagship, where Admiral Kethvar waited with the remainder of his crew. "Admiral, your fleet has been neutralized, and your ground forces have surrendered," he said calmly. "We are prepared to accept your unconditional surrender." Admiral Kethvar appeared on the main display, and his expression showed the shock of a military commander who had never experienced defeat until encountering Deathworlders. "Your species fights like nothing we have ever encountered," he said quietly. "How did you achieve such devastating tactical superiority?" Captain Kim considered his response carefully because he understood that this moment would define humanity's relationship with the rest of galactic civilization. "Admiral, we come from a world that tried to kill us every day," he explained. "We learned warfare from necessity, not choice, and survival required us to become very good at it." The Korath commander nodded slowly as he began to understand why his overwhelming numerical advantage had proved worthless against opponents who approached combat differently. "What are your terms for our surrender?" he asked, with the resignation of someone who knew he had no remaining options: medical assistance. "For your wounded, repatriation to Korath space, and a complete withdrawal from Vellani territory." Captain Kim replied, "We prefer live enemies to dead martyrs." Admiral Kethvar looked surprised because most galactic species would have demanded harsh punishment for the attempted genocide of the Vellani people. "You would permit us to survive after what we attempted here?" he asked with genuine confusion. Dr. Narration answered from her medical station, where she was already preparing to treat wounded Korath personnel, despite their recent hostility. "Healing the injured is what medical professionals do regardless of their species or political affiliation," she said simply. "Your wounded need treatment, and we have the capability to provide it." The rescue operations began immediately as human medical teams transported wounded Korath survivors to the Retribution's medical bay for emergency treatment. Navigator Woojin Han coordinated the complex logistics of gathering survivors from dozens of destroyed vessels, while avoiding collision hazards from floating debris. "Sir, we have recovered approximately 3,000 Korath survivors," he reported. "Many require immediate medical attention." Dr. Hyun Lim worked alongside Nari to treat alien physiology that was different from human medicine, but not beyond their ability to understand and help. "Korath biology responds well to standard trauma treatments," he announced. "We should be able to save most of the seriously wounded." The news of humanity's victory spread throughout galactic civilization faster than hyperspace communication as various species learned about the battle's outcome. Council Leader Thys received detailed reports about the engagement and could barely believe that a single human vessel had defeated an entire Korath battle fleet, confirmed total destruction of Korath's 7th Fleet with minimal human casualties, reported her intelligence staff. "The Deathworlder vessel appears to have sustained no significant damage, Ambassador." Velith of the Vellani people transmitted his gratitude to the Galactic Council and specifically requested to thank the human crew who had saved his civilization from extinction. "The humans asked for nothing in return," he said with obvious emotion. "They came because we needed help, and they fought impossible odds because it was the right thing to do." Other peaceful species throughout the galaxy began reaching out to Earth through diplomatic channels, seeking protection agreements and mutual defense treaties. The Alterian Republic offered to share their advanced agricultural technology in exchange for human military support against potential threats. The Rigelian Confederacy proposed joint research projects that would combine their scientific knowledge with human military innovations. Even species that had never experienced warfare began requesting human advisors to help them develop defensive capabilities. But it was the reaction of aggressive species that truly demonstrated the impact of humanity's military demonstration at Valen Prime. The Korath Empire immediately sued for peace and offered territorial concessions to avoid facing more human vessels in future conflicts. 3 other expansionist civilizations suddenly discovered the benefits of diplomatic solutions over military conquest when dealing with species under human protection. The Hegemony Council revised their invasion plans for several peaceful worlds after learning about Deathworlder combat capabilities. Captain Kim received a priority transmission from Admiral Jaeho Lee back on Earth, who had been monitoring the engagement through Galactic Communication Network's "Outstanding work, Captain," Admiral Lee said, with obvious pride. "You have established humanity as a significant military power and saved an entire species from extinction." "Sir, we simply did what humans do when someone asks for help," Captain Kim replied. The galaxy seems surprised that we kept our word. The galaxy is learning what it means to have Deathworlders as allies rather than enemies. Admiral Lee responded, "Prepare for many more requests for assistance." Chief Engineer Sora Choi summarized the mission in her personal log as the Retribution prepared to escort Korath survivors back to their home territory. "We did not come here to be heroes," she wrote. "We came because someone cried for help, and that is what humans do when peaceful people face extinction. The galaxy calls us Deathworlders like it is something fearsome, and they are right, but not in the way they think. We are not scary because we bring death to our enemies," she continued. "We are scary because we learn to fight death itself and win." Other species evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation was sufficient for survival, but Earth taught us that sometimes the only way to protect what matters is through superior violence. The Retribution began its journey back to human space with a cargo hold full of Korath prisoners who would be treated with dignity despite their crimes. The Volani people began rebuilding their civilization with the knowledge that humanity would respond if they faced threats in the future. The Galactic Council created a new military classification specifically for human vessels and designated them as Deathworld Response Units. The classification became the most requested and most feared designation in galactic peacekeeping operations as word spread about what humans could accomplish. Captain Minho Kim knew that this mission was only the beginning of humanity's role in galactic affairs because other species would test human resolve. But he also knew that Earth had produced the perfect soldiers for protecting peaceful civilizations from aggressive neighbors. Humans had learned warfare from a planet that wanted them dead, and they had become very good at applying those lessons. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when Deathworlders decided that someone needed protection. Ambassador Velith transmitted one final message to Earth expressing the eternal gratitude of his people for the humans who had saved them. "You came when no one else could help," he said. "You fought when victory seemed impossible, and you won when defeat was certain. The Volani people will remember forever that when we cried for help, Deathworlders responded by sending a fierce ship. The legend had begun, and it would spread throughout galactic civilization for generations to come."